Welcome to Arts in Conversations. Our guest today is Michael Francis, Music Director of the Florida Orchestra. Arts In is brought to you by Creative Pinellas. Our mission is to facilitate a vibrant, integrated, collaborative, and sustainable Pinellas County arts community and arts and cultural destination. Creative Pinellas is funded in part by the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners, Visit St. Pete Clearwater, and the State of Florida Department of State Division of Cultural Affairs. Michael Francis has quickly established himself as one of the leading international conductors of today, coming into prominence in January 2007 after stepping in for Valery Gergiev and John Adams with the London Symphony Orchestra. Taking over as music director of the Florida Orchestra in the fall of 2015, he is now entering his sixth season. His role in building a wide variety of transformative community initiatives has significantly grown the organization. Educational outreach with young musicians is of utmost priority for Francis. He conducted the National Youth Orchestra of Canada for their Spanish tour in 2019. He has also frequently conducted Miami's New World Symphony and the National Youth Orchestra of Scotland. Francis works on a regular basis with young musicians in Florida as a part of the orchestra's community initiatives. With the start of the 2019-2020 season, Francis began his tenure as chief conductor of the Deutsche Staatsphilharmonie Rhineland-Pfalz, and he has been music director of the Mainly Mozart Festival in San Diego since 2014. Francis's discography includes the Rachmaninoff piano concertos with Valentina Lidzitva and the London Symphony Orchestra, and Wolfgang Riem's Lichtenspiel with Anne-Sophie Mutter and the New York Philharmonic. Francis has collaborated with notable soloists such as Lang Lang, Itzhak Perlman, Christian Tetzlaff, Nicola Benedini, Sting, Rufus Wainwright, and many others. He is a former double bass player in the London Symphony Orchestra and has worked all over the United States and in Canada, as well as with several orchestras in Europe and Asia. Welcome, Maestro.
Thank you very much, Leah. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. On the behalf of Creative Pinellas and the entire staff, we are so thankful for you to join us today.
My pleasure. I'm here in quarantine in Florida, so what else am I going to do? I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. So should I call you Maestro? What should I call you? What's the proper thing for me to say?
Well, technically, conductors are called Maestro, but please call me Michael. We're not so highfalutin here. But yes, that is the title. It's one of the only times you write M.O., not M.R. for Mr. or Doctor, but M.O. is the usual terminology, as in when you write a letter to a maestro, but please, Michael is more than that.
Oh, so like Michael Francis, that's what it would look like if they were doing your letter, if they're writing your letter?
That's it. And maestro means teacher. That's sort of the actual official definition of the word. But yes, it's a curious term only given to conductors, and my friends and neighbors around here, of course, delighted. They love to call me Maestro, mainly because they've seen that Seinfeld episode in which the aforementioned chap likes to particularly be called Maestro at every opportunity. They find that most amusing.
I love that. We should have a clip of that Seinfeld episode come in so people understand the reference of it. I love it. Well, thank you for letting me call you Michael. Again, we're happy to have you here.
Pleasure.
I wanted to take a moment and show a video that the symphony did to thank their audiences.
It'll be my pleasure. Look forward to it. If I was a little more hirsute at that point, I had my COVID beard going on. But you may have noticed it was a little disjointed as we streamed through Zoom. If so people want to watch it properly without it kind of being a little jaggedy in the images, although the sound sounded very good, do go to TFO at Home on the Florida Orchestra website. You can see that and a plethora of videos that we have done during this lockdown period.
We will definitely post that in our Facebook live stream so people have access. And we've got someone who's monitoring the stream, and she'll put all of your social media information in there so people can stay in touch with you. That was so touching. Now, did that make you want to get up and start conducting as you hear it? Is it something where when you hear classical music, it just makes you kind of get more prone in your body and bring out?
It's a curious mixture, isn't it? When you sort of spend your life on something, I mean, I've been involved in this now for over 30 years, you're just constantly in it. There is a price to pay for being a musician, and the price is that you're never really able to fully listen in the same way as someone who's not a musician. Your ears are always that critically inclined. So, I mean, interestingly, with that in mind, I tend to relax listening to music of different genres, jazz, which I have very little expertise in, although I love it, or I listen to Irish music, or often I'll listen to chamber music, things that I would not conduct. When I'm conducting, my ears automatically start to hear other things, because of course that refinement comes at a price. The price is that you get to hear a lot more. I mean, that's the beauty of it, but the cost of it is that you actually tend to listen critically. Although that one, of course, I heard many times as I was part of the making of that. But actually our assistant conductor who used to at the beginning conducting, Dan Black, he put all that together for us and did a marvelous job.
Beautiful job, Dan. So how did you make the transition from musician to conductor? Tell me a little bit about kind of the mental, emotional, and maybe even physical shifts that you had to hone prior to.
So I wanted to be a conductor from around the age of 11 or 12, I would say. So when I started, what happened was there was a conductor of my youth orchestra, and I went to in East Sussex in England. That's where I was educated, and I had a very strong sort of music program. There's many youth orchestras. So I was in one of those, and I was a terrible backseat driver, trying to drive the orchestra from the bottom. And so the conductor, I think mildly out of exasperation, but also out of sort of genuine interest, admits with some other frustration, said that boy should be a conductor. And that sort of went in, and pretty early on I thought, well, I'd love to do it. So I wanted to join the best orchestra I could join, and that was fortunate. That was a London Symphony Orchestra, and I played with them for many years. And before that, I really studied a lot of the sort of analysis, history, and all the academics you had to do. So when my opportunity came, I had done very little conducting, really. I've done some youth orchestras, some amateur orchestras. I never studied it formally. And some conductors sort of happened to go sick or didn't turn up. And I just said, yes, I'll do it. Why not? What have I got to lose? And I just got up there and got on with it. What I do remember from one of the big jump-ins I did was how quickly I had to learn the music. I mean, I would often have a few hours to just really devour this music and get up and conduct it. There's one concert I did in Luxembourg when John Adams, I think you mentioned it on the in the introduction, he went sick at the last minute. And after that concert, I really remember my brain hurt because it was so, I had brain ache because of the concentration I wasn't used to doing. As a double bass player, I was used to it, but you sort of, becomes easier. But when you start conducting, the sheer amount of information you're dealing with at one time is quite epic. And that's what I do remember. And then regarding the physical shape, what you do notice is when you're playing an instrument is how toughened your fingers get, especially on double bass, and how your muscles work. In fact, I was just in Germany last week, and as one of the encores, I played the bass. And if you haven't played the bass for a long time, your fingers get these horrible blisters. And so I had these awful, uncomfortable blisters as I was playing, just to show that my fingers, which used to be as tough as a piece of sort of buffalo leather, and now as soft as a baby's toe, they really are pathetically weak. But as for the physical shape of conducting, you do sweat a lot, you do feel it. And there is actually quite a lot of important things you have to do in terms of how you prepare for concerts, what you eat, what you take in afterwards, all those things. But the most important thing is looking after your brain, making sure that you're fresh.
Can you share a little bit with us about what your pre-concert prep is or your post-concert prep is? Is there do you dip yourself in ice afterwards? Are you always eating a certain meal afterwards, or, no green M&Ms before? Tell me how you set yourself up for success.
Well, first of all, no ice water. It has to be Evian. If it's not Evian, I won't do it. What I do on a concert day is often we have a rehearsal in the morning, and there'll be the general rehearsal. Then I'll have the biggest lunch I can possibly eat. So I really fill up. And then before the concert, I'm very careful. I almost eat nothing except bananas and nuts, maybe a very small amount of yogurt, because you want your blood sugar to be stable. But if you're full, it's an awful feeling. And I remember when I was just starting conducting, I did a concert in Spain, and it was a televised concert. Beforehand, I was hungry because I didn't know all these things. So I went and had a big plate of patatas bravas, and it just sat there like a lead stomach, and I was just perspiring, looking pale and feeling awful on this televised concert. So I learned my lesson. So I'm really very careful about what I eat beforehand. And then afterwards, usually it's something involving a beer, I have to say. And the funny thing is, most conductors around the world all have the same thing. You kind of want a beer as soon as you walk off stage, partly because of its hydration, but also just that sense of just relaxation.
Right. I'm done. This is the signal. I'm really done. That's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I always wonder how all artists prep themselves and how they come kind of down after just giving so much mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually to, in your case, the music.
And actually, it's a good question, because it's something, I'm reading a book at the minute I call, where is it? Here we are. Because I'm interested in these subjects as well. Excuse my desk, I'm busy programming. But this is a book which I found interesting called Daily Rituals. And this is about the lives of what artists do and how they live and how their days go. Because like you, I'm interested in how others do it. I mean, and I think it's a real problem for performers in general. And of course, there's a litany of these disasters throughout the rock and roll world, through the classical world, of people being unable to know how to wind down. And so they try to keep the concert high, but they do it artificially through alcohol or drugs or other activities involving other people. And there's all sorts of things that can be done to actually try and keep that. But actually what we have to learn is to know how to let go, to wind down, and then how to refill and in the right way. And that does take time and experience, and it does change according to jet lag, where you are on the stage of life you're at. But these things are often not discussed. And preparation, and how to make sure. I might have to sleep on a concert day at least an hour and a half or so to really be out. Then I'm fresh, and all sorts of funny things that if you don't get it right, you really feel it in the concert.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to switch a little bit. Can you tell us more about the initiatives surrounding the young musicians, and how you introduce classical music, which is not programmed widely on TV or radio, or to younger audiences?
Yes, I mean, I think the first part of that, I'll go back even a stage further, is that why is it so important for young people to have that? And you think about every society we've ever seen in history, there's always a form of survival, there's a form of deity, and there's a form of music, always. And there's all sorts of other things which are also linked between them. But music is such an incredibly primal part of us. I was on a Zoom call with about 30 young people a couple of months back for another orchestra. And we were talking about different things. And I asked them, tell me your musical tastes. And I was blown away by the sheer variety of it. Because whatever we find in music is in many ways becomes a playlist of our life. It becomes part of our identity. It becomes a way that we discover our personal narrative in this world. And so I respect all forms of music. Well, most. There's some I don't particularly like, but I respect that other people might like them. So I think what's really important, can you still hear me? You seem to have frozen. Are you still there, Lee? Danny, hello?
I can hear you.
You can? Okay, you seem to have frozen. I wasn't sure if I went off.
If I'm frozen, you just go. You keep on going.
That's fine. So I think, so music is absolutely essential for all of us. I mean, if I was to ask you for the playlist of your life, and you would list for me 5 or 6 pieces immediately of things that mean so much to you, whether things you listen to at a time of grieving, a time of joy, a time of union, a time of remembrance, whatever it is, there's this incredibly powerful response to music. And someone said that, in fact, it's the second most powerful memory-inducing experience we have after smell. After that is the first, and then it's music and these things. So music is essential for all of us. It can bypass your intellect, go straight into your soul. And at its best, it combines both at the same time. And classical music is such an amazingly rich form of it because, of course, it's over 400 years, 500 years. So we have this vast amount of music from all around the world, from huge variety of style. So where we may listen to a pop song that has 2 or 3 lines going at the same time, drum, bass, and vocals, and maybe a guitar, classical music has so much more at times. So it just gives you a huge amount. What's important for me is that to introduce young people to music is not necessarily to talk about the technical aspects of it, but to talk about the connections. Talk about why Beethoven is as relevant today as he is for those young people, why he persevered, why he didn't give up despite what life gave to him, which was deafness. Can you imagine being a composer and a performer who goes deaf at the age of 30? That's the sort of seems like the worst curse. Yet he didn't, he's kept going and he kept uniting people, kept finding ways to bring us together, whether through humanity and brotherhood in the Ninth Symphony, or whether dealing with the complexities of faith in the Missa Solemnis, or the idea of freedom for all mankind in the Fifth Symphony. These things are the same today as they were then. And music gives you this incredible power, not just to sympathize with what has happened, but because it's emotive, it helps you to empathize with what has happened. When you listen to the finale of Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony, which was written under Stalin in the Soviet Union, you don't just recognize that there were a terrible sense of social injustice and oppression. You feel that defiance in the music. You feel that rebellion. You feel that power from the music emanating through. So as a result of it, I feel very passionate about sharing music with young people because we're in a very strange time in which people are getting increasingly isolated. This was before coronavirus. Of course, that's been accelerated. So what brings us together? Well, it's the arts. The arts unifies across all the borders. And so when we give young people a chance to play an instrument, we are giving them the best chance of discovering how to listen to each other, how to understand discipline and craft, how to understand the instinctive, how to understand the practicing, how to find their place in this world. So what we do at the Florida Orchestra is make sure there's no barriers to participation. So if there are young people who haven't been exposed to classical music for whatever reason, well, we're out there putting violins in their hands. We're teaching the teachers how to teach. We're making sure 28 to 30,000 kids have come to our concerts, schools concerts for free, as well as a further 60,000 throughout the year. We really absolutely believe in the power of music to help you find your place in this world and to help you develop empathy for others. So there should be no barrier to you having that opportunity. And we are doing our very best to make sure that's the case.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was beautifully said. Straight to the heart, straight to the point. I want to follow up a little bit with a question for you to tell me a little bit more about your strategies for developing diverse audiences. And diverse may mean someone who's never been to the symphony before. Diverse may mean social, economic, racial, any type of diversity. Tell me a little bit more about your strategies and maybe even your wish list.
I lost you for a second, Lee, so I'm going to continue with where you stopped off and then try to answer that question, and you'll come back in a second. So for me, the issue of diversity is that we have to reflect and inspire the community that we're in. Each orchestra has this responsibility to really understand where we are. And we are here in Tampa Bay with its rich and diverse population and community. So we want to make sure that we're reflecting that. And we understand that there are various parts of our community and various peoples in our community who have not had the access. So our Prodigy program, for example, is making sure that children who've not had that chance to be playing music, we're putting violins in their hands. As I mentioned, we're taking the teachers to go into the schools. We are programming, increasingly so now, more music by people from different ethnic groups as well. And you'll see more of that as we move forward as well. So a lot of that is the programming, trying to make sure that our artists as well reflect our community. And for example, at the beginning of the year, last year, we did a concert which was to celebrate Tampa Bay and its richness with that wonderful Cuban heritage, with that influx, of course, of European and of course, and other aspects within it. And our pianist was a Black pianist from Cuba, Aldo Lopez Gavilan, and his style of music and that glorious richness that you have in Tampa Bay. And we love that. So we do try to program accordingly, and there's always more that we can do. But I think a lot of what the real key work is what you're doing, you're going in and helping the younger people, helping them find that place, helping them find that voice. Our Sing Out Tampa Bay program, where we really encourage everyone to come and sing together, is another example of us trying to really unite us in a comprehensive way. And our community engagement, I mean, it's grown so much that I feel that we're really making good inroads, but there's so much. I mean, this area is growing. Someone said there's 150 people move to Tampa Bay every day. So we just need a bigger, more powerful, better funded orchestra to be able to keep going out and doing the great work, because it really, really matters. And I think also what's important is not just that we are celebrating and reflecting and inspiring our diverse community through music, but equally drawing attention to why composers like Beethoven, why Mozart, why Shostakovich, all these other composers are still dealing with those issues that unite all of us. No matter where you're from, no matter what race, no matter what age you're from, these are the great subjects of life that are the same for every person. And that's the same with Shakespeare, that's the same with Beethoven, that's the same with Dickens, that's the same with all of us. So again, it's a matter of communication, but we are really conscious, and we have many conversations, and we have a diversity, equity, and inclusivity task force, which is a very, very important part. In fact, I was talking with one of our members today about how do we make sure that we have more Black composers in our programs as well, which we're looking at for next year.
Can you tell us or share with us some of the composers that are your favorites that maybe either be Black or Latino or women, so that our audiences can maybe do some research and hear them? Who would you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So there's a really interesting one. So someone that people aren't always aware of is a chap called Joseph Bologna, who was called the Chevalier de Saint-Georges. And he was around the same time as Mozart. And in fact, they called him the Black Mozart. And I suppose that's a compliment, because Mozart, of course, is the greatest genius. And we have this, the Mozart of the soccer pitch, the Mozart of the snooker, Mozart of jazz. And so he's a really fascinating composer. And then I would also recommend listening to James P. Johnson, Will Marion Cook. I think William Grant Still is a fabulous composer. There's also Florence Price, who's a very important Black female composer. And there's a wonderful young composer writing brilliant music at the moment called Jessie Montgomery. I highly recommend listening to her music. And in the Hispanic, of course, that's such another big part of Tampa Bay. I would recommend listening to many of the composers such as Piazzolla. He's Argentinian. We have Revueltas from Mexico, Ginastera as well. So there's just a huge amount of fantastically talented composers that we're all really enjoying discovering and getting to know. And actually the good news is that through great institutions like the Sphinx Arts Organization, who really promote Black artists and composers that are really drawing attention to this fantastic amount of music. But of course, above all things, I'd recommend Duke Ellington and John Coltrane and Miles Davis. This is the music I love to listen to as well.
Indeed. There's so much crossover in music. And if you really just take a moment to listen, close your eyes, and have this wonderful tapestry that comes.
Absolutely. Music brings all the cultures together.
It does. I'm missing it. So tell me, what's been the impact of COVID-19 on the symphony, and what does the path to reopening look like? I know you have this wonderful TFO at home series that you've been doing. So floridaorchestra.org/keep the music going for our audience members. But tell us a little bit about how that's been for you, both personally and for the musicians that you work with.
Sad. I mean, frankly, I would say at its very core, for all of us, I mean, we finished a concert series on the second weekend of March, which for me was the best concerts we've done consistently. I felt like after 4 or 5 years of working together, we reached this moment where we were so consistent, such high quality. And anyone who was at that concert with the Rachmaninoff Third Piano Concerto, Beethoven Symphony No. 8 and Sibelius Symphony No. 7 will remember It was a fantastic concert, all three of them. So then to have that suddenly taken away has been, for quite a period of time, I felt rather bereft and rather lost, because we plan all these years 2 years ahead. So we have this whole cycle. I was in my study mode. We were going to concerts, programs, I was traveling, and suddenly, boom, the whole thing is taken away. And I think we have to be honest about that. And we have to be honest that it's really hard and that we miss the human interaction. And we can't just say, oh, it's a great chance to reflect. Yes, it is. And actually then, of course, you develop other things which give you a chance to reflect upon your life, the things that matter to you. But it is very core. It's been terrible. But of course, not so terrible as the people who lost their lives. So there's other ways of looking at it. But for artists, I think no area in this world has been as devastated consistently throughout the entire world as arts organizations. I mean, it's just been dreadful. I mean, for everyone, and many of them will not survive. We will, because we're absolutely determined to bring the music in as soon as we can. But it's extremely difficult for many. But however, on the positive side, as I mentioned, you have a chance to really reflect upon your own life and think about what matters, just to stop. I mean, someone pulled a handbrake on all of our lives, and if you look around, to enjoy nature, enjoy time with family, to think, do we need to be this busy? What are the things that matter? And as we move forward into the next season now, as we deal with what has been the most, I mean, it's almost kind of pre-COVID, post-COVID world that the whole world just changed in one go. This is far more dramatic than 9/11 in terms of the international effect. And that was, of course, the last, I suppose, major life-shifting experience that we had. I mean, there's many other ones, but that kind of event. But this whole period around COVID has altered all of us in a huge way. And what's been interesting is that the evidence shows that people have been listening to more classical music during this period. Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify, said classical music demand went up, I think, 30-40%. The people start to realize what they need, the things that absolutely are nutrition for the soul. And it's not just watching something you've seen before on Netflix. It's actually things that can satisfy you. It's like you can't just eat fast food, and you certainly can't feed fast food into yourself the whole time. You need something more substantial. And that's what our art form offers.
I want to take a time to ask for any questions from the audience. We're going to get to that section in about 6 or 7 minutes now. So if you have questions, please post them on the Creative Pinellas Facebook page in the feed, and I'll relay those questions to Maestro Michael. Tell me a little bit about how you've seen classical music evolve in the world since you started.
I think what's happened is, I think there's a lot more competition for our attention nowadays.
Very astute.
And that is good and bad. And I think the need for classical music is greater now than ever before, because actually, ultimately, what we give our attention to is what gives us happiness. It's not the trappings of the world. If it was, everybody who's rich and famous would be the happiest people in the world, but we all know that's not the case. It is actually the satisfaction of what we choose to give our attention to in depth, and the deep work of that matters. So the need for classical music is greater than ever before, but the distractions that are pulling people away from it are vast and epic. And these little suckers in our hands are very, very dangerous for affecting us in that way. So we cannot assume. And even when I was at school, there was more teaching about music in general. The arts had more voice in schools, but that seems to be dwindling internationally. So therefore, what our role as classical music, in classical music has changed. We need to be able to communicate the truths of our art form, to help people see the connections between Mozart and themselves. Why should we listen to someone who died 250 years ago? Well, let me tell you why he is just as relevant now as he was at the same time. So I think the role of the classical musician is far bigger. It's more educational, it's more embracing, it's more reflective of the community and society around. And we need not apologize for our art form, but what we need to do is draw attention to its inherent beauty. It is something that brings us together despite all the things that divide us. It is this glorious art form that just teaches us the great truths of music in the most beautiful way, And if you haven't been and seen a live concert, not just heard, but to see and watch an orchestra, then you're missing out on one of the great experiences of life. That thrilling moment when you feel an entire audience have goosebumps sweep through their body. And I can tell you when they are, we can feel it on the stage. It's a magical, powerful, magnetic, electric feeling in a live concert. And why is it so important to be live, not on a recording? Well, on a recording, you can be distracted, first and foremost. You don't have, and also the sonic experience is so different. It's so loud, it's so exciting, and it's so invigorating to be there and watch it, because you're watching risk. That's why I like live sport, why we all like live sports. You're watching violins play at the top speed. Are they going to fall off the tight wire, or are they going to keep going? And of course, my job is to push them to the very, very edge and sometimes beyond. But that incredible microscopic attention to timing is so deeply, deeply satisfying. And then all the other stuff that comes with it. But a live concert, there is nothing like it. I was just in Germany doing many concerts over the last few weeks. And what was amazing was how moved the audiences were, because you don't know what you've got until you lose it. It's a classic cliche, but it's a truism. And they were so desperate and hungry to have live music. It's like you can't teach arts very well unless you can interact with them. And that stuff is just so incredibly rewarding.
How did it feel for you to travel out of the country?
Felt fine. I'm actually, as far as I've been told, I'm no expert. Airplanes are quite safe because the way they circulate the air. I went and quarantined in the UK, which I stayed with my mother, and that was fine. And then traveling to Germany, everyone's very good about how they wear masks and all these different things. It felt very normal, actually. What was unusual was you do these concerts, the musicians are slightly more spread apart, and there's smaller ensembles. And then you finish these concerts, you turn around, and of course the audience is much more sparse, but you totally forget about it. And I spoke to a lot of people in the audience, what was it like? They say, well, it felt strange when you went in there, but you take off your mask, you sit down, and then immediately you're drawn into the music as if nothing else exists. And for us, it was exactly the same on stage. So it really felt rather defiant and wonderful. So nothing can stop that glorious power of live music.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. I can't wait for it to come back. So we've got some questions from the audience that I want to shift to. So Dorothy Johnson asked, how do you decide what specific pieces go into each program? What kind of collaboration goes on in that process?
Well, as music, my role is to really be in charge of those things, such as the pieces and the programming, and that's what I'm doing right now at the moment. But of course, it's a lot of conversation. It depends. We typically bring main pieces back once every 3 years. So there's a natural cycle. There's orchestration. So what pieces are using which members of the orchestra? Which pieces do I want to really grow the orchestra with and work with them, especially things they know very well. And also for the audience, bringing new things, different soloists, as we mentioned already about reflecting diversity. So there's a sort of this incredibly complicated series of little mechanisms and jigsaw puzzles that we put together. And I have a great team around me as well. My CEO, Mark Cantrell, we work together. He's a former musician. Ed Parsons, the artistic director, and the musicians and our concert master. So there's a lot of conversations. And then in marketing as well, what will sell, what won't sell. And I have a pretty good feeling for what works in Florida, but I'm also often surprised, both good and bad, by what does and doesn't work still. So, it's a team effort, but ultimately it's my decision. And I think it's important that it is one person in that sense, because these things aren't necessarily the best by committee.
Indeed. So Stephen Baumgarten wants to know, and you've mentioned a little bit about this, but I'm sure it's shifted now with COVID. Any thoughts, plans, ideas about the next season?
Many great ideas. I would say that what's essential for all of us is to build in flexibility. I mean, we're working with, firstly, Joseph Haydn, the great composer, said that when he was in his 30 years at the Esterházy court, he said, I had no choice but to become original, because he had to compose for the same person the whole time. Sometimes structure and strictures and the limitations create more creativity. And so we have this situation where the musicians, how many can we have on stage with 6 foot distancing, winds and brass a little bit more. We have the audience things. So we have a lot of these limitations, which is allowing us to look at new repertoire. that we would do. We can't do the big Mahler and Tchaikovsky symphonies, but there's lots of other incredible pieces that we haven't done. So I would say watch and enjoy. The announcements will come out probably in about a month's time or so. But of course, it depends on the halls, how they're doing. There's so many moving parts. It is both mildly terrifying and tremendously exciting. I'm pretty sure we will bring music. You will be delighted and enthralled, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Can you tell us about a song or a conductor that really moves you and why?
You know, for those ones, I think it's that sense of music being a memory. A stimulating memory, and I listen back. I think back to the pieces I heard when I was young. One of my hobbies was going to collect records in the local charity shops. So go along 50 pence or a pound and buy all these records and take them home. I was quite a nerdy kid. And then listening to pieces like the Passacaglia in C minor by Johann Sebastian Bach for the first time, and just this whole world of this cathedral of music coming in was absolutely spellbinding. I remember the first time I heard a reel by the Bothy Band, is a great Irish band, just took me straight back to my childhood, also in going to Ireland every summer. A great conductor I love is Carlos Kleiber, and he never did that many pieces, but what he did had such ferocious life and energy and drama. So if you get a chance to watch him, Carlos Kleiber, Kleiber, on YouTube, like the Beethoven 7 recording, watch that effervescent joy that he brings to it, and you realize the power of conducting to inspire musicians when it's done at its very best, like he did.
What might be helpful for people who are trying to get into classical music? Maybe some good albums for them to start with, or how do you introduce?
Well, I mean, I would say a lot of us here in Florida, we drive a lot. So put on WSMR, listen to the radio. I mean, and it'll have a profound effect upon your physiology and psychology, particularly after a bad day of work. And they're very good about knowing what music to play at what time. So, and just listen and listen to different things. Look at the greatest classics. They're the great classics for a reason. Vivaldi's Four Seasons, Beethoven's Symphony No. 5, anything by Mozart and Beethoven you'll love. And then start to explore other unusual things that pop up, like by Arvo Pärt, P-A-R-T. There's a piece called Fratres, F-R-A-T-R-E-S. And you listen to that with the lights off, and you'll find a completely different feeling within yourself, as this music will just wash over you and find this beauty and peace. I particularly love solo piano music. If you listen to anything by Bach, the Goldberg variations with Glenn Gould playing, these things will stimulate you. But really just listen to the top 20 best pieces of classical music, and you'll find the ones you like. But I highly recommend supporting your local classical radio. But the best thing of all, come to the concerts. Come to the concerts and trust that you're going to enjoy it. And I promise you, you will.
We've got a comment from Anna Sophia, who said she loved the fanfares last year. What are fanfares?
So that was a project that we did in which we commissioned lots of composers who were from Florida or working in Florida to write pieces of music to celebrate the orchestra's 50th anniversary, and then also to celebrate Beethoven's 250th anniversary. So we believe that music shouldn't just be a mausoleum where you just perform music by dead composers, but equally you should make sure it's a living art form that, like, you support and enjoy the talents that are around today. So we try to make sure we do a lot of commissioning at the Florida Orchestra of our local talents. If you're there, Lee, I've lost you.
All right. It's Danny Older here from Creative Pinellas. While we're getting Lee back, I had just a couple more questions myself. I stole a couple of Lee's that I was especially interested in. Sorry to intrude on you here, Lee.
No, please,
I wanted to ask is,
partnership.
You mentioned that you played the double bass originally. Do you still find time to actually play that from time to time, or do you focus mostly on conducting these days?
Well, as I mentioned, I played the last couple of weeks. I played an encore with a few of the players, and it was really enjoyable to play again, although my fingers were screaming in pain because, as I mentioned, they were very soft. I don't play anymore. I wish I was a really tremendous pianist. I think they have the easiest time during lockdown of all, because they can just continue to play whatever they like and have all that harmony. As a conductor, what our training is that you take a piece of music and like this, for example, and then we have to listen to the whole thing in our head. So you're learning to internalize all the music. So we hear the perfect symphony in our minds as best as possible. And then, of course, try to make sure the musicians are doing it the same way. So the internalization process is one which you just basically sit there with a piece of music, listening and reading it like a book.
Wow. I was really struck by your comment, listening to the music with the lights off and with no other way to prevent taking it in fully.
Yeah, and and listening, if you think about listening, it's something that, I mean, the ear is formed in the 45th day as a fetus, and yet the eye doesn't come in for another 7.5 months later. It's the first thing you hear is your mother's voice. It's not, and if I said to you, close your eyes, you would stop looking at me, but you can't close your ears. So how we deal with the sounds around us, and that's what music is, it's just organized sound. And it's something that is so powerful. You don't forget these things, and that's why memory is so important. And that's why music is the greatest of all art forms in some ways, and because it just deals with this thing that is around us the whole time. You never switch it off. And when you do close off other senses, like your eyes, for certain pieces, it's amazing how much more you can hear. Although, as a conductor, I tend to have my eyes open, and I do listen with my eyes open as well, particularly when driving. So.
Thank you. Safety first, safety first. What advice do you have for people wanting to make a career of being a musician?
Give it your full attention. I mean, and that's a small thing, but it's an enormous thing as well. Be passionate about it and give it space, and create space in your life for it, so that it does require excellence. It does require those 10,000 hours of practice. And remembering that it's a highly competitive business, so that when you're not practicing, others are. Find a physical rest, a day off a week, and all those things, but really love what you do and fill up on it, so that your passion overflows around you, and be surrounded by inspiring people. So find inspiring teachers, and if you do play, come along and play with the Florida Orchestra in our side-by-side projects. Be part of our community engagement. Be part of the Pinellas Youth Symphony. Give yourself the best chance. Listen. I would say the great thing about social media is you can watch anything on YouTube nowadays, and that's amazing. But there's still nothing like being there in the live.
Another question from Anita Kilpatrick. She says, we're so fortunate to have TFO when many communities have lost their orchestras. What's different about Tampa Bay?
Well, I think that's a lovely question. And I think what I love about Tampa Bay is that we play at 3 cities each week. I mean, we play in Tampa, we play in St. Pete, and we play in Clearwater. So you have these 3 different cities united, though, within one metropolis. For me, of course, coming here, it's the heat. As you can tell from my pasty white skin, I haven't quite been able to fully spend a life outside. But I love the area tremendously. I love the people. And what's amazing is how this whole community is absorbed by the arts. And here, your wonderful program here, Lee, is a perfect example of that. You walk around Pinellas or anywhere, and you speak to Jane Custer about Hillsborough and about Tampa, is this passion to understand the arts and how important they are. Do you know, there's a statistic in 2015 that the arts brought in $760 billion to the United States, which is more than agriculture, warehousing, and transportation combined.
Combined, yes.
That is the arts. It is an enormous cultural and economic driver. And I think this community has really absorbed it. So what we're noticing as our audiences are growing up, we're reaching more people. We're not in, and a lot of orchestras are struggling, but we're not. We're going the opposite way. We're swimming upstream, and very proud of that.
Me too. I'm so thankful to live here. All right. So what have been some of your smartest or dumbest decisions or business practices that you've made during your career? Let's spill a little tea for us, Michael.
I would say generally the dumb ones are when I've taken on too much, or I had the arrogance and conceit to believe that I could learn a piece of music quicker than I actually could. Because when you start, you don't know what you don't know. And so you think, well, that's okay. I played it once. I'll be able to conduct it. And even though I always worked hard, there were times when I felt certainly that I was out of my depth. And then there's also been times when in concerts I've made a decision. I'm thinking about one time it was a pretty big orchestra where the whole thing stopped. It stopped.
What?
Agonizing. Actually, it wasn't really entirely my fault, but it did. And as a conductor, you have to sort of say, "Oh, mea culpa, it's my fault. You're fine." Afterwards, you're going, "It wasn't my fault." Anyway, that's kind of what happens. So that's the worst feeling of all time when that happens. And fortunately, it's like a hen's tooth. It's particularly rare. But then I would say the smart decisions, of course, the smartest one of all is getting married well. And so my beautiful wife, Cindy, and since being married to her, of course, everything gets better and becoming a father. And the best decision, I would say, musically, well, one of them, of course, is becoming music director of the Florida Orchestra.
Tell me a little bit about how you pattern your career, because as I read in your bio, you're here, but you're also traveling in Germany, and you're also in San Francisco. So how does that work as you look at how you live your life as a conductor?
So I have management. So I have management in New York and in London and in Berlin. And then, so if an orchestra wants to work with me, they contact my management and then we work it out. And typically you're planning about 18 months to 2 years ahead of what you're doing. So, we're working on 21, 22. Of course, although the world tightly changed as a result of COVID, now everyone's panicking, trying to deal with next season. Usually by this point, next season is completely locked down. We don't think about it. We're a season or two ahead. So we're always thinking about what to take. And then for me, it's how to balance my time, my study, my rest, and then as I mentioned, I'm music director here, but I'm chief conductor in Germany. But it's different responsibilities. The music director role in America has much more responsibility in terms of how you interact with musicians, hiring musicians, fundraising, inviting other guest artists. In Germany, I'm the chief conductor, which means I do the most amount of concerts, but I don't have the other responsibilities. So it's in some ways, it's a slightly easier role in terms of the extracurricular activities. This is much more comprehensive, and the festival I have in San Diego is another one. So it's in terms of overall career plan, so much of life is what you say no to, not just what you say yes to. And that's very important. But really, I go with the flow and see where God takes me. I mean, you never know. And that's the great joy. I never knew I'd be in Tampa Bay, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Michael, tell us how audiences can stay connected and how they can support the symphony.
Well, I think supporting is important. What people may not know is that the ticket prices only account for about a third of our income. The rest is contributed revenue. And so actually, when people do donate to the orchestra, you are keeping the orchestra alive. And there can be small donations, or of course we have big donors as well. So supporting your arts is very, very important because you want to make sure that the orchestra is there for the next generations as well. But if you look on the Florida Orchestra website, floridaorchestra.org, and go to all our Facebook and all these other things, you'll find an enormous amount of entertaining and enthralling and interesting videos, and of course, plenty of information about what we're doing. And then if you watch carefully over the next coming weeks, you will see some of our very, very exciting, creative and flexible plans to conquer the hopefully post-COVID world by that point, or maybe current COVID world, who knows? But either way, we're going to be providing music.
I've got 2 more questions that have come in from Facebook. Donna McGrew wants to know if you've followed any of the classical FM pieces on Facebook.
Yes, I mean, classic FM is yes, I know a lot about them, and I think I know what you mean. And yes, I'm aware of that website, but it may be something that I'm not aware of. So I think so is the answer.
Okay. And then Linda Mastery wants to know, is there a suggested age for a child to begin private music lessons?
Mozart was 3. My daughter started playing the violin at 4. So I think whatever age they start to have an interest, I would say, and they want to do it, is important. But I started playing the double bass when I was 10 or 11. So I was older. So it doesn't really matter. It's never too late. And also for all you adults as well, do pick up an instrument. There's no better way to relax, to stimulate a different part of your brain, and to really go profoundly deep into that great attention that art forms sort of require of us. So there's no real problem with starting young. Just as long as they want to do it and you have a good teacher who inspires them, they will have. Here's the good news with it. When you play an instrument, it is the only single human activity that stimulates all 7 types of intelligence at the same time. The only single human activity. That's it. That's it. Playing an instrument. Verbal linguistic, there's visual spatial, there's logical mathematical, there's bodily kinesthetic, naturalistic, intrapersonal, and musical harmonic rhythmic. Boom! Drops mic. That's there. Done.
What more do you want?
You want a smart kid? Give them an instrument.
Michael, you are an incredible advocate for music, for classical music, for the arts. I am so thankful that you are in our community, that you see the beauty of our community, and that you are continuing to do incredible, incredible work. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to our audiences before you wrap up? I want to give you, pass the mic back over to you.
Well, firstly, thank you very much, Steve, for inviting me, and thank you, Danny, as well, for stepping in when we had some internet connections. And so thank you very much. It's great to see how much you are passionate about this great community and the art forms that are going on within it. All I would say to you is just enjoy the richness of the art forms that we have available to us, to find ourselves in this thing. And I think COVID has taught all of us the necessity of finding what unites us. And the arts are the richest one for that. And the music and an orchestra does it perhaps more magnificently and beautifully than any other one, although I am a little bit biased.
What about, have any special discoveries that you've had during this COVID-19 time? New music or new art form or a new game that your family's been playing?
I think reading, I've really enjoyed. I discovered something which I didn't know about. You may have heard of Lapham's Quarterly, which are this marvelous thing that comes out, which takes a subject like memory or something, and then it gives you all these writings over the last 1,000 years, and that's been brilliant. Listening to music, I've really enjoyed, but lots of reading. I reread Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, just the other day, and that, of course, completely horrified me how prophetically accurate it is in many ways. And I think lots of reading, I think, has been a great pleasure, but time with family and a lot of walking, a lot of nature, and just slowing down. I've slept a lot more. I mean, it's an awful thing to be thankful for COVID. We can't be thankful for something that has devastated lives, but we can certainly make the most of it, and make sure we feel glass half full about it. And I would say that I certainly look upon things in a different way now. So that I'm grateful for.
Thank you so much also for mentioning the restorative power of rest. You have said that several times throughout our interview today. And I feel like that, both for artists and art lovers, for people to continue to be healthy, that rest is so key. And we have a tendency in our society to feel like resting is lazy or resting is a waste of time. So when I hear you continue to mention your sleep, to mention your rest, that really resonates with me.
Yeah, I mean, Abraham Lincoln said, if someone gave me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I would spend 4 hours sharpening my axe. When we rest, we sharpen our axe. And I think this is one of the greatest lies of modern society, is that this continual need, you're only good if you're constantly working hard. This is not true. You've got to give yourself space.
We got one more question from R.L. Campbell. He wants to know, are there opportunities to volunteer with the orchestra once the COVID is over?
Oh, yes, there are. And we would love to have you. Absolutely. And if you contact some people on our website, and they will be able to help you. Kelly Smith it would be a great person to contact. You can find her details. I think it's ksmith@floridaorchestra.org. But absolutely, we would love to have you involved. Thank you very, very much. There's always a great deal for people to be involved with. Thank you very much, R.L. Campbell.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your time, for this beautifully inspiring and communal conversation.
My great.
We look forward to seeing you in person and hearing in person as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Take care, everybody, and see you soon.
Yes. Thank you everyone for watching today, Arts in Conversations. Tune in on Thursday for our next conversation with 2019 Creative Pinellas Artist Laureate Akiko Katani. Akiko is going to be doing a new series called Friend with a Friend. So check in with that. And Danny, please roll end screen. Thanks for watching Arts in Conversations. For more information on Arts in and all the programming and resources from Creative Pinellas, visit creativepinellas.org.